also known as the sign of the serpent. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Turkey! And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. This is episode 75 on this Thanksgiving week.
That's right.
November.
We don't take days off.
That's right. No days off.
All the other hosts out there, they're taking their days off for
Got their
Thanksgiving.
guest hosts.
Snake Bros, we're in the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science.
That's right. And the other person
count on us.
who doesn't ever take a day off because we don't, he is still here with us, is Mr. Brett England, the Watcher. How you doing, buddy? What's going on? You ready for turkey?
Doing well, man. Had some thoughts today, speaking of Thanksgiving week, on things I'm thankful for. Thankful for the podcast, but most of all, I'm thankful for Skirptards. Because without them, we wouldn't, have the motivation, or there would be no need for this. There would be nothing to combat. They're like the Joker to our Batman.
We gotta have you gotta have the villain in order to have a fight. Yeah. Okay, I got you. Right. That's cool. That's pretty cool. Thanks, Skirptards.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us a reason to have this podcast, Skirptards. We are having a lot of fun telling you how wrong you are. All right. As always, we start out with space weather news. Solar minimum conditions are in effect. The sun is blank again today, the 191st day of 2018 that the sun has been without spots. To find a similar stretch of blank suns, you have to go back to 2009 when the sun was experiencing the deepest solar minimum in a century. Solar minimum has returned, bringing extra cosmic rays, long-lasting holes in the sun's atmosphere, and strangely pink auroras. That is from spaceweather.com. Fantastic website. You guys should check it out. They have daily updates on space weather.
Yeah.
So the other space weather news we have is about ancient space weather. Like, I'm sure that these people that went through this probably wish they had a Snake Bros podcast announcing space weather news before this happened to them. Discovery, this is from the dailygrail.com, another fantastic website that explores ancient mysteries, a lot of the same topics that we look at here on Brothers of the Serpent. Discovery of a massive crater in Greenland supports controversial theory of a comet impact 13,000 years ago. So this is written by Greg at the Daily Grail. Did a comet collide with the Earth 13,000 years ago, just as the world was emerging from the Ice Age, sending it back into a 1,000-year-long period of freezing temperatures and darkness? That is the core idea behind a controversial scientific theory that has emerged in recent decades, known as the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis, which we have spoken about many, many times on this podcast, so you guys should all be familiar with it. The Younger Dryas is the name given to this anomalous period where warming after the last glacial maximum mysteriously and suddenly reversed for a millennium around 10,800 BCE, or before Common Era. The Younger Dryas impact theory shot into the public's consciousness after alternative history author Graham Hancock covered it in detail in his 2015 book, Magicians of the Gods, in which he also took the controversial theory a step further, suggesting that this impact may also have erased evidence for an advanced civilization in humanity's deep past. As he writes on his website, the result was a global disaster that lasted for 1,300 years. It is, I believe, the smoking gun that made us a species with amnesia and wiped out almost all traces of a former high civilization of prehistoric antiquity. But there were survivors who preserved at least some of the knowledge of the civilization that had been destroyed with the intention of transmitting it to future generations. So it is not an accident that the first traces of the re-emergence of civilization, in the form of the earliest known megalithic architecture and the re-promulgation of agricultural skills, occur at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, 11,500 years ago, a date that coincides exactly with the end of the Younger Dryas and the return to a more congenial global environment. Everything we have been taught about the origins of civilization occurs after 11,500 years ago. In other words, after the radical punctuation mark of the Younger Dryas. It is what happened before that we desperately need to recover.
Yeah.
While the Younger Dryas impact theory has remained on the fringes of orthodox science over the years, Tantalizing clues supporting it have been emerging recently, such as a study finding that a comet impact 13,000 years ago set fire to 10% of the planet, and 2 other pieces of research that suggested a catastrophic extraterrestrial impact event occurred 13,000 years ago. Okay, so those are 2 links there. A new crater. But now, the smoking gun perhaps might have been found. A new study published today in Science Advances under the title, quote, "A large impact crater beneath the Hiawatha Glacier in northwest Greenland," unquote, provides concrete evidence of a previously unknown ancient extraterrestrial impact event that ranks in the top 25 ever discovered. And what's more, many of the researchers involved believe that it may be the impact that explains the Younger Dryas anomaly. The reason the crater had previously been undiscovered is that it lies beneath the ice sheet in Greenland. It was only first recognized in 2015 when Dr. Kurt Jayer, or Kajayer, I'm not sure how to say it, a geologist at the Center for Geogenetics at the Natural History Museum of Denmark and lead author of this new study, was analyzing a NASA map of Greenland with a colleague when they noticed an enormous circular depression on the Hiawatha Glacier at Greenland's northwest tip. Dr. Kajayer's mind unconsciously made an instant connection with the impact of the image of a large meteorite on display in the courtyard near his office in Copenhagen, immediately coming to mind. That meteorite, called Agpalilik, or that's the Inuit for the man, is a 20-ton fragment of an even larger meteorite, the Cape York, parts of which have been found by Western explorers in the last century, though they had been previously used by Inuit people as a source of iron for harpoons. There's a picture of one of the fragments.
Oh,
Pretty big, yeah. Called the tent.
Cone-shaped.
Yeah. While he initially laughed at the idea, Dr. Kajayer and his colleague quickly realized that there might be something to it. Quote, "There's only so many ways you could create a circular feature beneath an ice sheet," unquote, he told the New York Times. After further research, he and his team spent 3 days in May 2016 flying over the crater using ice-penetrating radar to map the hidden structure. Their initial suspicion was confirmed with the aerial survey revealing a huge pit with an elevated circular rim and raised structures in the center, telltale signs of an impact crater. And it was massive, nearly 1,000 feet deep and 20 miles in diameter, caused by a comet or asteroid that was likely close to a mile in diameter, or 1.5 kilometers. Further confirmation came with sediment samples collected from the floodplain below, high concentrations of minerals like nickel and platinum, and pieces of highly shocked quartz indicated an iron meteorite impact. So a mile-wide ball of iron.
Yeah.
Or really, space steel is what it is, because it's got nickel in it. And while the New York Times article seems to assiduously avoid dating the impact, only saying that the team cannot establish an accurate date for the impact beyond saying it occurred during the Pleistocene, a wonderfully detailed write-up of the new research in Science reports that despite this, many of the researchers involved do have an opinion on when it happened, and that date corresponds with the Younger Dryas impact theory date of 12,800 years ago. And this is a quote from the paper. The timing is still up for debate, but some researchers on the Discovery team believe the asteroid struck at a crucial moment roughly 13,000 years ago, just as the world was thawing from the last ice age. Or no, maybe this is from the New York Times. The impact would have been a spectacle for anyone within 500 kilometers. A white fireball 4 times larger and 3 times brighter than the sun would have streaked across the sky. If the object struck an ice sheet, it would have tunneled to the bedrock, vaporizing water and stone alike in a flash. The resulting explosion packed the energy of 700 1-megaton nuclear bombs, and even an observer hundreds of kilometers away would have experienced a buffeting shockwave, a monstrous thunderclap, and hurricane-force winds. Later, rock debris might have rained down on North America and Europe, and the released steam, a greenhouse gas, could have locally warmed Greenland, melting even more ice. The fact that many of the researchers appear to be endorsing the fringe Younger Dryas impact theory has already set alarm bells ringing in orthodox circles. This is a hot potato, Jay Malash, an impact crater expert at Purdue University, told Science. You're aware you're going to set off a firestorm. Malash doubts the suggesting impact dating, though his reasoning seems a little forced. Statistically, he says, impacts the size of Hiawatha occur only once every few million years, so the chance of one just 13,000 years ago is very small. Nevertheless, Science covers the controversy fairly and in detail. More from Science here. The news of the impact discovery has reawakened an old debate among scientists who study ancient climate. A decade ago, a small group of scientists proposed a similar scenario. They were trying to explain a cooling event more than 1,000 years long called the Younger Dryas, which began 12,800 years ago as the last ice age was ending. Their controversial solution was to invoke an extraterrestrial agent, the impact of one or more comets. The researchers proposed that besides changing the plumbing of the North Atlantic, the impact also ignited wildfires across 2 continents that led to the extinction of large mammals and the disappearance of the mammoth-hunting Clovis people of North America. The research group marshaled suggestive but inconclusive evidence, and few other scientists were convinced. But the idea caught the public's imagination despite an obvious limitation: no one could find the impact crater. Proponents of a Younger Dryas impact now feel vindicated. I'd unequivocally predict that this crater is the same age as the Younger Dryas, says James Kennett, a marine geologist at the University of California, Santa Barbara, one of the idea's original boosters. Now, with the discovery of the Hiawatha crater, I think we have the smoking gun, says Wendy Wolbach, a geochemist at DePaul University in Chicago, who has done work on fires during this era. Unquote. But the researchers are relying on more than wishful thinking when it comes to confirmation of the dating, as there are multiple lines of evidence already supporting it. And they quote from here, let's say, lines of evidence. 1, the crater bottom is exceptionally jagged. If it occurred much earlier, it is likely the bottom would be smoother due to the erosion from the ice. 2, one previously drilled ice core in Greenland shows a spike in platinum about 12,900 years ago. 3, the aerial radar survey also showed that most of the ice in Hiawatha is perfectly layered through the past 11,700 years, but in the deepest layers, the ice is disturbed and all jumbled together.
Man.
Furthermore, the team matched the jumble with debris-rich surface ice on Hiawatha's edge that was previously dated to 12,800 years ago. It was pretty self-consistent that the ice flow was heavily disturbed at or prior to the Younger Dryas, one researcher notes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there most likely there was already ice there, and it impacted through the ice, melted a bunch, and then it froze again.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
And
but all the scriptards are like, hell no.
So there's more here. However, lead researcher Kajair is tiptoeing around the controversy. I'm not putting myself in front of that bandwagon, he told Science, while admitting that his team had, quote, explicitly called out a possible connection between the Hiawatha impact and the Younger Dryas, unquote. However, other researchers remain scriptartical that this is the smoking gun for the Younger Dryas impact theory. Jennifer Marlin, a paleoclimatologist at Yale University, notes that, quote, it's too small and too far away to kill off the Pleistocene mammals in the continental United States. And I can't imagine how something like this impact in this location could have caused massive fires in North America. Yeah, because you're dumb. But perhaps this impact was just one of many across the region as part of one larger event. As Graham Hancock notes, there is a huge fingerprint spanning North America, Central America, parts of South America, most of Europe, and parts of Middle East as well, known as the Younger Dryas boundary field, in which the telltale traces of multiple impacts by the fragments of a giant comet have been found. While the debates will go on, it seems certain that this new comet impact discovery will re-energize proponents of the idea that the world's climate was massively disrupted 12,800 years ago by an extraterrestrial cataclysm.
That's awesome. So why do it's just a side note, but it seems like the comet and meteor or meteorite is sort of interchangeable.
Yeah. I think that a comet is going to have meteoritic or meteorite type material in it no matter what, because it's going to have boulders and rocks. And a comet is basically a giant ball of ice with a bunch of meteors inside of it, or asteroids inside, you know, what you would call asteroids or meteorites or whatever. They're not meteorites until
they hit Earth.
Yeah.
But I just hear people like the words are interchangeable. But like at the end of the story, they talk about
right. So the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis talked about cometary impacts because comets are the ones associated with the Taurids cometary stream, right? But
right
in the comet,
but that geologist that there was the whole debate with Michael Shermer and on the Joe Rogan podcast with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, and the geologist that they brought on when they brought up the comet thing, he was like, I'm not saying it's a comet, saying it's so it's like sometimes they want to
Right, right. And sometimes they'll flip back and forth on them.
They want to say, well, we're not saying it's a comet. We're just saying it's something from outer space. It
Yeah.
could be a meteorite.
Yeah.
Then
It's an impactor is the best word, really. Because we
probably
don't...
the journalists that have different ways of expressing it in their stories.
Right. Like a meteor is an asteroid that has hit the Earth's atmosphere. A meteorite is a meteor that has made it to the ground.
Okay.
I think that's that's how it works. But
I thought a meteoroid is the thing out in space, right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, or maybe a meteoroid is what they call it after it's hit. I'm not sure.
It's meteorite is the stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Ite.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not a
Like
meteor.
calcite.
And it's not. It's a meteor while it's burning through the atmosphere.
Okay. So then maybe it's
a meteoroid is what
the
it is
one
out in
that's
space.
just out in space. Or maybe it's the other way around because they always say meteors.
Yeah. What is it, Watcher? Figure this out for us.
Yeah,
Because we know meteorite.
We need to know the correct nomenclature.
We cannot continue with our scientific discussion without the correct nomenclature.
I did not know that there was a thing called IPR. Ice penetrating radar. I thought it was GPR that you could. I mean, obviously,
ground penetrating radar. Ice is not ground.
Ice penetrating radar.
IPR.
IPR.
Okay. Most of us have probably seen meteors or shooting stars. A meteor is the flash of light that we see in the night sky when a small chunk of interplanetary debris burns up as it passes through our atmosphere. If any part of a meteoroid survives the fall through the atmosphere and lands on Earth, it is called a meteorite.
Okay.
So the meteor is just the actual flash of light. It's not the object itself.
Okay.
The meteor...
So it's an asteroid when it's out there.
Right. It's an asteroid out there.
Asteroid...
Then when it comes into the atmosphere and we see the burning flash of light, that's a meteor. The thing causing the meteor is the meteoroid. And if it makes it all the way to the ground, it's a meteorite.
Okay, dang it.
That is the proper nomenclature. This is why I like impactor.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever change. But yeah, I agree that the whole, like, what is it, a comet? Is it a, and they're like, oh, it's a meteor that hit the, no, it's not. It's a meteorite if it hit. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, the reason I'm saying they think it was commentary is because of the Torrid's meteor stream. But see, it's called a meteor stream, right?
Yeah, I know. This is a beeroid. Now it's a beer.
And once you finished it, it's a meteorite. Or something like that.
That's right. It's a beer can.
Yeah. And then a little later, it'll be urine.
18-pack of beeroids. Slam some beers.
So what's also interesting, and I've been watching this sort of... the Watcher is saying that crater at 20 miles across is larger than Paris or Washington, D.C. How is that not large enough to have that level of impact? 700 megatons of force is equal to 2.926 times 10 to the 18th joules of energy, by the way. That's a lot for those of you in Rio Linda.
Yeah, so on the dating, the story I read said that it's anywhere from 2 million to 12,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Old.
Right. Except that, like the jumbling of the ice at the bottom of the Greenland.
Well, yeah, but there's like the scientists that were quoted in the story were amazed at how well preserved the crater is, and it's like usually craters will just be ground away by the glaciers.
Right.
I'm like, well,
exactly.
that's obviously telling you that it's not 2
very
million
old.
years old.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Those ice sheets haven't had long enough to move very far.
Well, and another thing that I didn't see any of this in this article, but of course this is all fairly new. This is,
Friday
was
when the first publication.
Right. Well, they first started looking at it in 2015, but this is the publications have just come out for the scientific paper. Yeah. So what I'm expecting or what I'm hoping will happen is that they're able to that now that they have a possible source crater. Right.
Yeah.
That they're able to go back and look at all their data for all the impact proxies and see if some of the exactly. Now that might be difficult because it's also mixing with the material of the thing that hit, and that is somewhat of an unknown. The other thing they need to do is is start trolling that whole area with magnetometers and find out if there's a giant magnetic anomaly.
Well, they found other meteorites around nearby the area. So obviously it came in and broke up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think
some of them would have exploded in the atmosphere, and there would have been mayhem.
That's why it may have actually been a comet.
Yeah.
Like what could have come in is actually an enormous ice ball full of asteroids, and some of them would be nickel iron. Other ones would be what they call carbonaceous chondrites, right? Basically limestone, holy limestone.
So it's like all this stuff that we find like down in South Texas off of the Edwards Plateau, where it flattens out, or maybe it's still on it, but it's all flat. You're off the hills.
Yeah.
There's all these round balls, like stones that are, when they're broken open, you can see this crystallization that's coming out from the center. I don't know what the proper nomenclature is for that. But it's like all these striations or crystalline growth lines that are coming out of the center. And they're said to be, I can't remember the name of these, but they're flying through the air. They're pieces of molten, sort of, not from the ground, but from the exploding, the thing is exploding in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so there's these molten pieces of...
Right, and they recrystallize in air, and then they land as teardrop
and they're
or
like
sphere
little
shape.
teardrop things.
Yeah, so the crystallization looks like it has this starburst pattern. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's, I wonder if all that's from the same event, because it's still on the surface. Like it would be strange if it was just, we're on sedimentary rock here, and it's just kind of weird to think like there's going to be these weird crystal things
like rolling around on the surface
that were millions of years old.
Right. Yeah.
Because they would have been embedded in the bottom of the sea.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess they would erode away, but they're not encased in anything. They're just,
we find them rolling around on the surface. Like,
they're not here where the hill country is, where it's been pushed up and everything's eroded. They're off
down in the flatlands.
Right, where it's all sandy.
Right. Yep.
And
that's a good point.
And the limestone bedrock is underneath that sand, you know?
Deep beneath all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so it's not ejecta, but it's not, they're not meteors or meteorites. They're something, it's like I thought for a while.
I keep wanting to say bolide, but that's the actual meteor that explodes.
Yeah, a bolide is a meteorite or a meteoroid that explodes in the air. So ejecta is like droplets of material or enormous chunks of material that get thrown upwards by the impact.
Right.
So you're right, there's another name for these when it explodes in midair and there's droplets of molten material from the thing that then fall down they're not called meteorites, but they are from a meteor.
Yeah.
Caused by a meteoroid that exploded, called a bolide.
It's ridiculous.
But I love this, like the fight that has been going on online, like the hardcore, not hardcore, but there has been some like shit talking basically going back and forth. And like now there's this huge bet. So like one of the main guys who is like an enormous Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis.
Firestone?
No. He's a scriptard of it. He's like one of the detractors, right? He's the guy that wrote the paper that was like the impact hypothesis, rest in peace. It's like totally destroyed. Those papers that Graham Hancock talks about in Magicians with the Gods, how this guy, he'd like totally like write papers about how it's been completely destroyed, even though it totally hadn't. Like they found one piece of evidence that they then they make all these long stretches to claim that it just totally debunks the entire hypothesis. And he's like, rest in peace to this stupid theory that never was even real in the first place. That guy's name is Mark Boslow. Okay. And this is also very interesting. Like I always think these connections are fascinating. This guy is also a huge proponent of the overhunting theory.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And also
the Clovis culture overhunted themselves after they overhunted
Right.
all of the
First, they
megafauna.
killed 150 million mammoths in a single generation before they could recuperate by having babies. And they also killed every other like mega mammal in the north, or 70% of every other mega mammal, megafauna that lived in the United States, continental Americas, I guess you would say. And then they hunted themselves into extinction right after that, and then afterwards set fire to all of their shit so that there would be soot on top of it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so that guy is a big proponent of the overhunting theory for the extinction of the megafauna, and also a major proponent of modern day man-made climate change, or AGW. The anthropogenic global warming. So, like, those two things seem to be linked, and he hates the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis because it just kind of, like, number one, shows what real climate change is, and number two, takes away the ability to blame humans for killing all these animals.
Yeah.
Which, like, kicks a huge step, a bunch of columns out from underneath the theory that humans, even in their most primitive butt flaps and spear state, can totally cause mass extinctions.
Yeah.
So,
And on top of that, it opens the doors for the hypothesis that there was an advanced civilization that was wiped out,
right.
or most of it was, most of the evidence of it was wiped out.
Yeah.
So there's huge problems with it in the scriptard community.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, if some of the dating for like Gunung Padang is right, 30,000, 28 to 30,000 years, like that's not just pre-Younger Dryas. That's pre-Ice Age stuff. Like, we should call them like the hipster civilization. Because
before it was cool?
They became a civilization before it was cool.
That's good, yeah.
The ancient hipster civilization. Well, like all hipster civilizations have to be ancient, right? Because they had to have done it a long time before anybody else did.
Yeah.
So it's redundant to say ancient hipster.
I thought the Ice Age, like the glacial maximum, was like 50,000 years ago.
Well, technically the last glacial maximum was between 25 and 30,000 years ago. So you're right. It
wasn't 50, so I wasn't right.
Well, that's just the glacial maximum. 50,000 years ago would have still been in the Ice Age. I just wanted to make that hipster joke.
If all that dating is right.
Yeah,
true. We don't even know. Like this
like,
could change a lot of that.
Yeah, I totally agree that a lot of, like, if that crater is acknowledged to be only 12,000 years ago, we need to completely relook at all the stratification dating that has been done for all of that era. Because catastrophically deposited strata is deposited fast, right?
Yeah.
And so if we've been looking at these enormous layers of strata, or these groupings of layers, and counting them in millions of years, that needs to be totally...
Yeah, and that opens up the doors for the forbidden archaeology, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Like all of the, the Homo sape remains found
that are
where they cannot possibly be.
Right.
In like multiple million-year-old rock layers.
Right. Like the guy next to the petrified tree beneath Tabletop Mountain.
Yeah.
Like beneath the mountain that they dated, that's 350 million years old. Well, that can't be a person, right? It's just a random collection of minerals. And
in other words, what we're saying is this is some serious snake juice right here, this story.
Right.
just want to slurp it up.
That's right.
With forked tongues.
Serious snake juice. This is a fantastic set of snake bites.
That's right.
So it's a little early, but I think we're going to take our first break.
Be prepared for a massive fight.
Yes.
I guarantee you there's going to be... they're not going to let it go. Like the standard model of geological dating, of archaeology, all of that stuff, they're not going to want to budge at all. So if it is irrefutably dated to that time period, then you're going to start seeing all this sort of shuffling around to make it fit.
Yeah.
What everybody already knows, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
It's going to be ridiculous.
They're going to try to cram it into the existing standard model story.
Right.
And then claim that everybody was being ridiculous for thinking that it wasn't like that in the first place.
Yeah. And the easiest way to spot that is when they make rules, like one exception that breaks a different one of their rules in order to make it fit.
Right. Like the London hammer.
Yeah.
Where the way they explain it is that like that rock formed really fast, against the uniformitarian theory in order to explain how it can't be really old stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. They make an exception to break all of their own rules in order to shove something into something.
Whatever rule is being challenged by the new data, that one can't be broken by the new data because that's too big. So they use one tiny little detail to break a different rule.
Yeah.
Only on this occasion.
Right. Yeah.
So that their standard, so the main rule that the new data breaks it's not actually breaking. Don't worry, folks. We still know exactly what happened, even though we didn't know about this.
Yeah, that's right.
2 years ago.
All of you are being ridiculous. We already knew that this was here, even though we didn't know it was here.
That was Russ's first prediction. They're going to say, well, we figured that was under there.
Yeah. All right. Well, take a break and come back, and I've got some great stuff, I think, about ancient agriculture.
Snakes! With one fork of our tongues tied behind our backs just to make it fair. Brothers of the Serpent podcast returns. Segment 2. Also, we forgot to mention, it is true, the Watcher is in his 3x3x3 tangent cylinder of science. High atop the globe. Deep beneath his space bunker in secret outer space. And he's doing a great job today. Thank you, Watcher.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to get a hold of us or comment right now on Twitter, asking us questions about any of the other shows, you can do that, but you won't hear me saying that right now. But next time you're thinking about it on Tuesday and you're seeing that Twitter feed going, you should throw us some questions and comments.
Yeah. And thanks to those of you who have joined the Twitter feed and have sent us questions and comments.
Oh,
it's been
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. And you can also get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com anytime.
Right. Like the Watcher Father, who sends us all kinds of awesome emails over the Gmail.
One day, when our bandwidth increases, we will do live feeds, possibly.
Yeah, that would be fun
for the podcast. So you guys will be able to interact with us as it happens.
Yeah,
and then you will know that we truly do not cut anything out.
That's right.
Of our show.
You will experience the fact that there is zero editing. No mistakes.
The ever unedited Snake Bros podcast, unless there's a technical difficulty.
Right. And then we just lose the whole segment.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if you were on the live feed, we would just do it again.
Yeah.
Right in front of you.
It's just like, we're going to do that segment again. Yeah.
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going back to this impact, or this crater. It just was during the break. It was just really hitting me that this is such a beautiful setup that we have, where there is this, what to call it? The ice sheet is this mechanism for leveling, digging, and grinding away any geological feature of the planet, right? And we have this perfect display all over the place where these ice sheets have and glaciers have receded that show us what it does to whatever might have been there before, right? It just completely scars the landscape. So we have that we can measure. And then we have this new discovery that is this preserved feature underneath. And it's just like this, it's such a perfect scenario. If this crater had been found anywhere else, it would have been a lot easier to place it according to the standards model, of dating these geological features. This one just it's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like it's a synchronicity.
Yeah.
This
is why they're calling it the smoking gun.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost impossible to claim that this thing is incredibly ancient because it's beneath something that, if it was incredibly ancient, would have ground it into nothing.
Yeah, we would not be finding it.
Right. Yeah. The lifespan of large geological features beneath glaciers is very small in terms of geological timescales.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, that was just really hitting me, like how perfect this scenario is. And, this may just be the tip of the iceberg. No pun intended. Seriously, like, they've been doing these ice cores and all that kind of stuff, but doing IPR on these ice sheets, I've never heard of that. Obviously, they've been doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah,
but who knows how extensive their work has been? How much ground have they covered?
Yeah.
So,
well, there's some great images of the IPR data. And there was a fantastic one that I saw that Sacred Geometry International, Randall Carlson's channel on Twitter, posted. I guess they retweeted it or whatever, but they had posted it up, and it's basically somebody took a picture of their big flat screen TV monitor that was hung on the wall that had the full graphic of the IPR data for the crater up on it, in the greens and blues. Looks like a LiDAR image, right? So it shows you the subglacial features, and you can see that there are. What's also interesting is there are enormous water erosional features that go into the crater. Like the crater itself was submerged beneath glacial ice and water at the instant it was created.
Right.
Right, and there was this enormous outflow, but there was from the north an inflow of material coming in.
So you can imagine this. Finish the picture description.
What was great about the photograph was mounted above this enormous flat screen was a gigantic mammoth tusk. Like put on this like custom, and then somebody in the comments was like, "What is that thing above the TV?" And somebody was like, "It's a giant wooden mustache."
It's an ivory mustache. That's what mammoths are walking around with, massive ivory mustaches.
Massive ivory mustaches.
Okay, so your description of the crater, so there's ice there, and this thing impacts it. And it drives all the way down to the bedrock and explodes and blows everything out of there. But you've got these massive
ice
cliffs
walls,
of ice, the wall around this crater, and it's hot. So it's catastrophically melting the edges of this wall of ice. And so it's creating these massive ravines or crevasses that
enormous
are eroding down into it and making this slurry of all of the metals and the
and it's
dust
boiling and who knows what else.
It's freaking
and probably
I want to be there.
Woo, I want to be there. But probably that whole glacier was probably, I can't remember what this is called. See if you can find out what this is called, Watcher, where a glacier gets lifted up on its own meltwater and starts to float and it begins to move much quicker. So Arctic or polar glaciers, polar ice sheets don't do this. They're frozen all the way to the ground, right? And so, unless they're on the ocean,
the North Pole
is just water.
It's over the water.
So so what I should say is any ice sheet over land has the potential to be frozen all the way to the ground, to the land. There's no water involved, and it's just slowly grinding away as it pushes down slope from whatever mountain it's being created from, right? But sometimes once they reach into more temperate areas, the meltwater begins to collect beneath the glacier or the ice sheet, and then it starts to move a lot quicker. And it'll have say 10 meters. This is what numbers I've seen: 10 meters of meltwater beneath it under immense pressure because above it is 2 miles of ice.
Yeah.
And that water is moving incredibly quickly across this subglacial landscape and just tearing the hell out of it, even more than the glacier does. So you get these strange, right? So I wonder if that impact happens and there's this shock effect that goes through the ground underneath the glacier, cracks it all over the place, and then the heat gets all this water underneath it, and the whole thing starts to move very quickly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It must have been just we can't, destruction and craziness on a scale that we can't even imagine.
Yeah, but if this was part of the Younger Dryas phenomenon, then it refroze fairly quickly, geologically speaking. Everything got cold, so there was, it must have thrown so much stuff up into the atmosphere that it blocks out the sun.
Yeah.
What would you call that? It's the red house,
dark house
particulates, dark house particulates.
Yeah, also known as a nuclear winter. It's not nuclear. It's.
So this is where you get this. This mammoth is walking along. He's eating flowers in Siberia.
Yeah,
and something throws him back on his haunches and breaks both of his femurs or whatever.
Yeah, shatters his pelvis.
Yeah. And you can see that this shock wave comes and just boom, breaks your bones, throws you on your back, and then you freeze so quickly, so rapidly that the food that you've just swallowed into your stomach is not even putrefied when it's found 12,000 years later.
Right. And I wonder if that means I wonder if that means that huge I guess what you would call ejecta droplets of slurry, basically icy water, were thrown, and one just on top, it just freezes it. I don't know. It's hard to understand how.
Yeah, because anything, that much material
should have
hitting you would just crush you.
Yeah, just destroy you. Yeah.
So this is creating. Think about the eyes of these hurricanes and how cold those temperatures can get because
you're
the
talking
drafts,
about.
right? So it's this impact creates this shock wave, and all around, because you've got all these currents of air, jets and currents in the oceans and all this kind of stuff, and everything, all of the atmospheric currents are suddenly just completely scrambled. So you have all these crazy storms just form almost instantly within days. You've got
within minutes. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, they're gonna grow as they go out, and then they're gonna be building energy.
Right. And then the eye wall will be so tall that it's reaching up into the stratosphere and pulling down just super cooled gases straight to the surface.
So you can imagine
everything there. Yeah.
Shockwave of the animal, breaks the animal's bones, but it doesn't completely destroy it.
Yeah.
And then
he can't move.
Within a day or two, he's frozen solid.
Solid. Yeah. Yep.
And one of that one that I'm talking about died of asphyxiation.
Right. Couldn't breathe.
So, in temperatures that low, or if the temperature drops that much, you can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Due to a vacuum.
Right. Exactly.
Freeze dried.
Vacuum
freezer.
Vacuum freeze dried. Excuse me. So I also think that this let's go all the way down to the South American continent, right?
Let's go.
Yeah.
We need more donations to the pyramid scheme.
Take a trip with me, guys. Yeah, send us your 2 cents on the pyramid scheme so we can go to the South American continent. I was thinking this past week. I was sort of thinking about the triple A's of ancient civilizations: not archaeology, astronomy, agriculture, and architecture.
Yeah.
Right. The 3 things that we
associate with civilization,
with ancient civilizations, and the ones that show us the most anomalies. We see that they have this strange advancement in astronomy based on many, many, many ancient structures. Quote unquote strange. We actually don't. The whole idea here at Snake Bros is that it isn't strange because they were advanced, but according to the standard model, right, a strange advancement in agriculture. Like it's just completely unexplained how these people out of nowhere started domesticating plants and animals. You know, the whole like, let's go get that aurochs and tame it and then plow this field so that I can grow these grasses so that my grandsons can have food.
Yeah, can have actually wheat.
Right.
And they will be able to bake bread.
Right.
Right? I've never seen anything like that before.
That's right.
But it's a great idea.
This is a good plan.
We just invented beer, so let's go get the oryx.
Stop painting in those caves and let's go get this animal. Okay. So I was thinking about this, and like there's actually some specific anomalies from the Lake Titicaca / Tiahuanaco area of Peru / Bolivia, right? And Graham Hancock goes through some of this, and to me this is fascinating. He goes through some of this in Magicians of the Gods, so I'm going to read some stuff from this. Okay, a struggle and abandonment. This process was hastened by the fact that the earthquakes which had caused Lake Titicaca to engulf Tiahuanaco were only the first of many upheavals in this area. So he's talking about there's all this evidence that enormous earthquakes caused like basically what you would end up with as like tsunamis from the lake that went outward from the lake and engulfed Tiahuanaco and Puma Punku, and like that's why we see now that the blocks are just thrown all over the place from the earthquake, and then they're buried in enormous amounts of sediment, but it's specifically lake sediment, right? Not ocean sediment. And now we see these old shorelines of the lake that are tilted 30 degrees to where the lake is now. So there were massive, enormous earthquakes. Could have been caused by this same period, like, you know, gigantic impacts hitting the North American continent could have sent reverberations across the entire plate system.
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, these initially resulted in the lake swelling and overflowing its banks, but soon they began to have the opposite effect, slowly reducing Titicaca's depth and surface area. As the years passed, the lake continued to drain inch by inch, marooning the great city, remorselessly separating it from the waters which had previously played such a vital role in its economic life. At the same time, there was evidence that the climate of the Tiahuanaco area had become colder and much less favorable for the growing of crops than had previously been the case. So much less favorable that today staples such as maize, which is corn, cannot ripen properly, and even potatoes come out of the ground stunted. Although it was difficult to piece together all of the different elements of the complex chain of events that had occurred, it seemed that a period of calm had followed the critical moment of seismic disturbance which had temporarily flooded Tiahuanaco. Then, slowly but surely, the climate worsened and became inclement. Finally, there ensued mass immigrations of the Andean peoples towards locations where the struggle for life would not be so arduous. It seems that the highly civilized inhabitants of Tiahuanaco, remembered in the local traditions as the Viracocha people, had not gone without a struggle. There was puzzling evidence from all over the Altiplano, which is the plateau that this whole place is on, that agricultural experiments of an advanced and scientific nature had been carried out, with great ingenuity and dedication, to try to compensate for the deterioration of the climate. For example, recent research has demonstrated that astonishingly sophisticated analyses of the chemical compositions of many poisonous high-altitude plants and tubers had been undertaken by somebody in this region in the furthest antiquity. Such analyses, furthermore, had been coupled with the invention of detoxification techniques which had rendered these otherwise nutritious vegetables harmless and edible. There was as yet no satisfactory explanation for the development of these detoxification processes, admitted David Brauman, associate professor of anthropology at Washington University. So basically, there were plants that were basically edible up there, but they were totally toxic.
Yeah.
Somebody undertook this scientific study to figure out exactly what the toxins were and then to detoxify them so that they became edible.
So this is the process of cultivation, basically?
Domestication, yeah.
Domestication.
Domestication of
They call it domestication of plants?
Yeah, like a domestic crop, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's...
I did not know that term was used for crops.
Yeah, okay, so likewise in the same ancient period, somebody as yet unidentified by scholarship went to great lengths to build raised fields on the newly exposed lands that had so recently been under the waters of the lake. a procedure which created characteristic corrugated strips of alternately high and low ground. It was not until the 1960s that the original function of these undulating patterns of earthen platforms and shallow canals was correctly worked out. Still visible today, and known as waru waru by the local Indians, they proved to be a part of a complex agricultural design perfected in prehistoric times, which had the ability to, quote, outperform modern farming techniques, unquote. In recent years, some of the raised fields were reconstructed by archaeologists and agronomists. These experimental plots consistently yielded 3 times more potatoes than even the most productive conventional plots.
Holy crap.
Likewise, during one particularly cold spell, a severe frost, quote, did little damage to the experimental fields, unquote. The following year, the crops on the elevated platforms survived an equally ruinous drought. Then, quote, they later rode high and dry through a flood that swamped surrounding farmlands. Indeed, this simple but effective agricultural technique, invented by a culture so ancient that no one today could even remember its name, has proved such a success in rural Bolivia that it had attracted the attention of governmental and international development agencies, and was now under test in several other parts of the world as well. So, like, somebody...
I'm imagining this... The description that you're saying is like these... Almost like these berms raised up, and then there's a trough or a ditch, and then a raised berm.
Yeah.
Like, how big are we talking about?
I don't know. It doesn't say.
Because
corrugated fields is what he called them.
Yeah, corrugated, like corrugated steel.
Right.
So they have retaining walls, or are they just sloped? I don't know. I'm trying to visualize it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't come prepared with photographs.
No worries. Pixar didn't happen.
But I'm fascinated by this concept of, in incredibly ancient times, somebody did like a detailed analysis of these various local plants, determined the toxins that made them inedible or made you ill or killed you or whatever if you ate them.
Like and the tannins that were just bad or tasted bad and
then found a way to basically genetically modify them in some fashion in order to remove those from the plants entirely and make them then edible and nutritious.
The first GMOs.
Yeah.
So with olives, for example, the olive straight off the tree.
Oh, there it is. Wow. The Watchers posted us a picture here. Wow.
Yeah, those are, it looks like the plastic truck bed.
Yeah.
Like the old school.
Like, I wonder what's growing on it. It would be cool to have a relative size thing out there to figure out how big those are.
They look pretty massive.
Yeah. That's really cool.
So
I'll post that picture in the show notes, folks.
Thinking of fluid dynamics, looking at that, like when a frost rolls in, all of the coldest air is going to fall to the lowest, right? And then roll downhill. So you survive a frost. I'm not sure about the drought situation. Maybe there's wicking involved somehow. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. But
maybe in the drought, the water that was retained in the bottoms of the trenches was able to feed the plants.
Because it's in shade. You can see it right there.
Yeah.
All the trenches are shaded.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then during big floods, the plants are still high and dry.
Yeah. We got to do that out of
I know. I was going to say, that's really cool.
Send our boss a picture of that. Just be like, give me a massive dozer.
That's right. This is 10,000-year-old techniques. It works. Trust me. But like, again, I'm astonished at this. Like, I keep coming back to this. Like, somebody, like, you cannot explain this adjustment of these plants with guesswork or trial and error. You can't do it, right? The combination of catastrophic period, like swell of the lake that covered everything over, and then the drastic change in climate that resulted directly after that, and then suddenly we have these like desperate techniques.
Yeah, so what you're saying is there's no buildup. We don't see the scientific process,
right?
You know,
there's no like generational, like they were going to starve if they didn't have food. Suddenly, nothing can be grown up there, including corn and potatoes. And so they went out and found native things that were nutritious but would kill you, and changed them in order to stay up there. And very interesting. Another picture here.
Yeah,
that
so
one
there's
looks like a.
there's the steep slope going down the side of the mountain or the hill, and the corrugations are running perpendicular to the direction of the slope.
Right, and they're all connected to each other like in a maze fashion.
Yeah, zigzag snakes.
Yeah, bunch of snakes on the hill.
So it would protect from runoff.
Yep.
You know, so it would capture a lot of the precipitation in a drought period. Whatever
Yep.
precipitation you had would slow it down from runoff and erosion.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that is cool. And then
But what I was going to say about the tannins and the these toxins or whatever in the plants, the olive tree, the olive is toxic. You can't just pick the olive off the tree and eat it.
Oh, really?
They're no good.
Okay. Glad I didn't try that.
I mean, I'm sure you can eat one. It won't kill you, but it's nasty.
Yeah, I know they're gross. Yeah.
Right.
I
But
didn't know they were-
if you ate a whole bunch of them, it probably would make you sick because of
Yeah.
all the tannins, right?
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know that for a fact. You could check me on that, Watcher. But the interesting thing to me about it is that it's the same with these olive trees. Like everywhere we find the olive trees, they were brought there. There's some record of somebody bringing them from supposedly somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
And planet and like nowhere in this in our records is anybody finding the olive trees where they were growing naturally, picking the olives and figuring out their process of how to basically process them to keep them from to remove the tannins, in other words, to make them edible. So
Yeah.
like as a hunter-gatherer peoples, how do you're walking through an area and there's olive trees, right? And you just grab all these, you're like, oh, fruit.
Yeah.
And you grab all the fruit off the tree and then you eat one. It's just like, ah. And if you eat too many, you get sick. So what do? Like, how do they know that, oh, okay, well, I need to put them in a stone basin of salt water for months.
Right.
Right. Oh, well.
Yeah, who figures that out?
But we're nomadic.
Right.
Okay, so let's just carve a stone basin here, throw all the olives in there,
Yeah.
find some salt water somewhere, put them
Yeah.
in there, put the lid on, and continue our nomadic lifestyle.
Right. We'll
and then
come
next
back and
time we
check
come
this.
back,
Yeah. It'll be fine.
yeah, they'll be
Trust
great.
me.
And then who's the guy that's like opens up the stone lid like,
I'll
okay,
try
let's
this one.
let's scrape off the weird stuff on the top
Yeah.
and let's eat one. Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah. So the watcher says unprocessed olives.
Let's shove a frickin' pimento in the middle of it.
Unprocessed olives won't make you sick or kill you, but chances are you won't want to eat one. Olives right off the tree contain a high concentration of a compound called oleuropin. Is that right?
I don't know.
Oleuropine, which gives them a bitter taste.
From what I've researched, that's the tannin.
It's a
or
tannin
whatever.
type. Yeah. Oleuropine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So you
Like-
can eat acorns too, but they're nasty.
Yeah, they're gross.
Right?
Yeah,
But
totally
in order to remove the nastiness, you can boil the acorns, dump all that water out, boil them again, dump all that water out, boil them again, dump all that water out. Or that's what they do with the olives. They put them in this brine,
I
and then they
remember
dump
doing
all the
that,
water
yeah.
out, and then fill it back up, and then dump it all out.
Yeah.
And fill,
While you guys were in Italy, I was doing that every day to the olives we had in there.
yeah.
I remember that process. Every day I'd go in there, dump all the water out, rinse everything off, put fresh water in there, close it up, write it out on the whiteboard, put a tally mark.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my point is just adding to this mystery, like who were the
Who
people
comes up with this?
and how do you come up with it when you're starving?
Right.
Okay, don't worry, guys. In a month, we'll have food.
Yeah.
Tannins are a class of astringent polyphenolic biomolecules that bind to and precipitate proteins and various other organic compounds, including amino acids and alkaloids. The term tannin refers to the use of oak
And other
and
bark.
other bark tanning animal hides into leather. Oh, maybe that's how they did it. They were using the tannins to tan animal hides.
So
and
they
then-
were soaking them to get the tannins out.
And then somebody ate
was
one later and they were like, oh my God, these taste way
Yeah.
better.
There was some Kamak out there that was like, how?
Yeah. Okay, but again, this is just interesting. It's like, who figured that out?
Yeah.
Like, hey, look, if we pick all these olives off this tree and
Yeah.
we soak them, you can taste tannins just from a bitter taste. Like
Right.
typically, if you eat a fruit or a nut and it's extremely bitter, that bitterness is a
It's
tannin.
tannin. Yeah.
A tannin or whatever,
A.
because obviously they're different
Yeah, they're
compounds.
Mini tannins. Yeah, I agree. I think the ancient. I just find the ancient agricultural stuff is the same as all these other things. This is what I'm trying to say. The 3 A's, right? This is going back to like the very beginning of Snake Bros, like episode 2. We were talking about the 3 A's of ancient civilizations, the mystery of the 3 A's. Why do they seem to have been so advanced in astronomy, architecture, and agriculture when they should not have been, according to the Standard Model theory? So like all this stuff we're talking about is just like when we're looking at pyramids or impossible blocks, right? Or when we're looking at how they knew about precession and everything. It's the same thing. This is anomalous. This is an indication of anomalous according to the Standard Model picture of the human race. This is anomalous data.
Right. So when you're locked out of the secrets of the ancients, you call the AAA and and they let you in. They open the door.
I just want to say, like, that reminds me, before we go into this break, I was listening to episode 71 about the fairies or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did not catch at the time we were doing this. At the time we were doing that, because I was focusing on reading the stories and getting all the names right and everything, and I didn't catch it, but you were like, or, you know, and I was like, you know, we couldn't find fairies or whatever, and you're like, or you could go out there and burn a bush, and then... Yeah. I did not catch that when you did it before, but that was hilarious. That's a Zelda reference.
The classic
with
Zelda
a Zelda sound effect reference.
That's right.
That was a good one. But that made me wonder if, like, that's obviously what happened to Moses.
Yeah, exactly.
He goes out there and there's a burning bush. Right? And then next thing you know, he's kicking Pharaoh's ass.
That's right.
Pharaoh
He comes down from the mountain and he's like, space news!
Egypt is about to get hit by a giant plague of meteorites.
So the Watcher's pointing out ayahuasca, smash it, boil it, pour that out, boil it again.
Shit yourself and vomit until you pass out, then go on a vision quest. That's right.
Who figured these things out?
Boil them, smash them, stick them in a stew. It's ayahuasca.
Yep. All right, well, take another break and be back for the second half of the show.
That's right. We are back here at the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Corporate Studies, where the learning never stops and where we know almost nothing.
There are no degrees.
That's right.
Only certificates of know-nothingness.
Certificates of ignorance.
Yes, certificates of ignorance.
Put them up on your wall and display them proudly.
Yes. We don't actually know.
Again, the email, you guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Also the Twitter feed @Snake Bros.
Yep.
Snake Bros with no vowels. So I wanted to kind of back up a bit in the Graham Hancock Magicians of the God text I was reading. So I'm going to back up a bit from what I just read and read the previous part, which is a more fascinating discussion here. It's called The End of the Viracochas. We saw in Chapter 10 that Tiahuanaco was originally built as a port on the shores of Lake Titicaca, when that lake was far wider and more than 100 feet deeper than it is today. Vast harbor constructions, piers and dikes, and even dumped cargoes of quarried stone at points beneath the old waterline leave no doubt that this must have been the case. Indeed, according to the unorthodox estimates of Professor Poznansky, Tiahuanaco had been in active use as a port as early as 15,000 BC. The date he proposed for the construction of the Kalasasaya, and had continued to serve as such for approximately another 5,000 years. Okay, so that's...
I think he says Colossasia.
Colossasia. You're right. Yeah, you're right. 5,000 years is a long time to use something. That's a... Yeah. So this had been continued to be used for approximately another 5,000 years, during which great expanse of time, its position in relation to the shore of Lake Titicaca hardly changed. Throughout this epoch, the principal harbor of the port city was located several hundred meters southwest of the Colossia. Is that right?
Colossia?
Colossia?
I'm pretty sure that's how you say it.
I'm getting it wrong. Colossia at a site now known as Puma Punku, which literally means the Puma Gate. And like that fascinates me because of the pumas across the planet.
Yeah.
Right. This is the Puma Gate. And this name has lasted until modern times. The Puma Punku.
Yeah.
The Gate of the Puma. Okay. Of the Puma. Here, Poznansky's excavations revealed 2 artificially dredged docks on either side of, quote, a true and magnificent pier or wharf where hundreds of ships could at the same time take on and unload their heavy burdens. Hundreds of ships. So we're talking about an enormous construction.
Massive, yeah.
One of the construction blocks from which the pier had been fashioned still lay on site and weighed an estimated 440 tons.
Damn.
Numerous others weighed between 100 and 150 tons. Furthermore, many of the biggest monoliths had clearly been joined to each other by eye-shaped metal clamps. In the whole of South America, I knew, this masonry technique had been found only on Tiahuanacan structures. The last time I had seen the characteristic notched depressions which proved its use had been on ruins on the island of Elephantine in the Nile in Upper Egypt.
So is this they have like this is the Keystone Cut where
Yes.
they basically, you put 2 stones together and where that connecting line is, you carve a circle or like a ring that goes half on one side and half on the other stone?
Yeah, except that these were T-shaped. So like on one block it's a T and on the other block it's a T facing the other direction. So it makes this I. That's what they will look like in Tiahuanaco. But yeah, keystones could be circles,
Oh, I thought he was saying, okay.
What? What did I read?
The eye-shaped ones or the circular one.
He said, furthermore, many of the biggest monoliths had clearly been joined to each other by eye-shaped metal clamps.
Okay.
So I've seen the keystone cuts from Tiahuanaco, and they're all like, they look like eyes turned to the side, or like a really fat
so
H.
So the T like are curved basically. That's
Yeah.
what makes it the eye shape.
Well, the T is if you look at it
Sideways.
the T
yeah.
is laying on its side. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but they're actually they would all have been facing upwards.
Right.
But yeah, so if you're looking at it, it's basically a really wide H.
Yeah.
Or an I laid on its side.
Okay.
So each block has a sideways T carved into it.
I as in the letter I, not EYE. Oh. I was like, eye-shaped.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Cuts.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, not like seeing
thinking of the
eye.
eye.
No, I-shaped,
So it's
capital
like,
I.
so there's circles sort of like cut in this.
They're like this almond shape.
Yeah.
thing. No. I'm sorry. I-shaped as in the letter capital I.
All right.
Yeah,
gotcha.
my bad. I'm glad you pointed that out.
But I had seen in Puma Punku, like I just have this mental picture in my mind of this stone that's got this half circle cut in it.
Yes.
And it's laying there by itself.
Yes,
That's
you're
what
absolutely
I was thinking.
right.
I was like, maybe that's the this eye-shaped keystone cut.
No, you're totally correct about that. No one knows what that is. It's not assumed to be a keystone cut, but it could totally have been. I thought that it looked like it kind of looks like that thing was a piece of some sort of metallurgical trench. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it would be. It didn't look like a keystone cut
Because it was
just
deep. It was really
yeah,
deep
and
yeah.
perfectly sharp.
It might have been a
edges.
mold or something. Who knows? But yeah, the keystone cuts are fairly shallow.
Just look at Puma Punku. Like, just look it up, and every stone you see, you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Looks like a bunch of bits and pieces of a clock.
Who? Where?
Yeah.
What? Exactly. Equally thought-provoking was the appearance of the symbol of the cross on many of these ancient blocks, recurring again and again, particularly at the northern approach to Puma Punku. This symbol always took the same form, a double crucifix with pure, clean lines, perfectly balanced and harmonious, deeply recessed into the hard gray stone. Even according to Orthodox historical chronology, these crosses were not less than 1,500 years old. In other words, they had been carved here by a people with absolutely no knowledge of Christianity a full millennium before the arrival of the first Spanish missionaries on the Altiplano.
Right.
Where, come to that, had the Christians obtained their crosses? Not only from the shape of the structure to which Jesus Christ was nailed, I thought, but from some much older source as well. Hadn't the ancient Egyptians, for example, used a hieroglyph very like a cross, the Ankh or Kru Ansata, to symbolize life, the breath of life, eternal life itself. Had that symbol originated in Egypt, or had it perhaps occurred elsewhere earlier still? With such ideas chasing one another around in my head, I walked slowly around Puma Punku. The extensive perimeter, which formed a rectangle several hundred feet long, outlined a low pyramidal hill, much overgrown with tall grass. Dozens and dozens of hulking blocks lay scattered in all directions, tossed like matchsticks. Posnansky argued in the terrible natural disaster that had overtaken Tiahuanaco during the 11th millennium BC. And so now he quotes from Posnansky. This catastrophe was caused by seismic movements which resulted in an overflow of the waters of Lake Titicaca and in volcanic eruptions. It is also possible that the temporary increase of the level of the lake may have been caused in part by the breaking of the bulwarks on some of the lakes further to the north and situated at a greater altitude. So like there were natural dams or bulwarks of lakes up higher, and then those broke during the tectonic upheavals, and then all that water flowed down into Titicaca and then overflowed everything down there, right? Thus releasing the waters which descended towards Lake Titicaca in onrushing and unrestrainable torrents. Posnansky's evidence that a flood had been the agent of the destruction of Tiahuanaco included, quote, the discovery of lacustrine flora, Paludestrina culminea, and Paludestrea andicola. Wow, there's a bunch of names here that I can't say. Anachillis titicanensis, and some other ones, etc., mixed in the alluvia with the skeletons of human beings who perished in the cataclysm, and the discovery of various skeletons of Orestias, fish of the family of the present Bogus, in the same alluvia which contain the human remains. In addition, fragments of human and animal skeletons have been found lying, quote, in chaotic disorder amongst wrought stones, utensils and tools, and an endless variety of other things. All of this has been moved, broken, and accumulated in a confused heap. Anyone who would dig a trench here 2 meters deep could not deny that the destructive force of water, in combination with brusque movements of the earth, must have accumulated those different kinds of bones, mixing them with pottery, jewels, tools, and utensils. Layers of alluvium cover the whole field of the ruins, and lacustrine sand mixed with shells from Titicaca, decomposed feldspar, and volcanic ashes have accumulated in the places surrounded by walls.
Man.
So, like, an enormous tidal wave came out of the lake.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, you would think that at 11,000 feet above sea level, you're probably safe from tsunamis.
Flooding.
False. So, and I've read tons of online things, Wikipedia, various other places about Titicaca. No one ever mentions any of that. No one ever mentions, you know, enormous amounts of bones of both people and fishes and other various things from the lake mixed with land stuff, and then jewels and tools and other things like that, all mixed in alluvium deposits amidst these giant blocks that are scattered like matchsticks all over the plain. They don't ever say any of that. None of that is in the popular literature that I've looked at. It might be in some of the scientific stuff, but Posnansky was looking at this place a long time ago, you know, so relatively long time ago.
Is there a standard sculptard model of it, or do they just don't talk about it?
They just don't talk about it. I mean, the standard model for Tiahuanaco is 1,500 years old.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just who built it? You know, that's the question. Like a 440-ton block carved with all this perfect stuff, you know. And the other weird thing, like I haven't been able to directly confirm this, but I have seen both videos by people that I trust and other images or whatever, that some of these blocks, these andesite or diorite blocks that are in Puma Punku, are magnetic. You know, like, I don't know, but people walk up to them with a rare earth magnet and go thunk and stick it to the block. Now, either the block contains tons of iron or it's magnetic itself.
So they don't know where they got them?
Right. The source of the blocks is unclear. So you have that. So you have this, like, this is what I find interesting about the whole place. You have this anomalous complex, right? Some kind of dock system, a dock system on a lake, but it also has all these aspects of a metallurgical factory in the sense that like lots of the blocks seem to be stained by copper residue. They're green, right? They have this green residue all over them. So there's that. Then there's the fact that nearby in the mountains nearby, I think one of the mountains nearby is the only source of tin in South America, or maybe in the entire American continental.
What's that used for again?
To make bronze, copper,
yeah.
and tin. So if you're mining the Michigan mines during the warm season up there, and then as the cold season begins, you put all your copper ingots on boats and you sail to South America, which during that period will be in its summer.
Yeah.
And then you like get all the tin that these guys are getting out of the mountain nearby and combine them to make bronze and then take them to Europe to have the Bronze Age, right?
Wow.
So I find that to be fascinating. And then there's this there's this enormous cataclysm that destroys it. And then after that, there's this incredible agricultural effort that shows like deep scientific knowledge of chemistry and, you know, genetic stuff. And I don't know.
Yeah. Isn't there the place in the Amazon or whatever, they were studying the soil and it looked like it was the soil itself was manufactured.
Yeah.
And it was underneath all the
whole jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's called something preta or something like that. It basically means black dirt, and it's alive and it was manufactured. Okay, so the Watcher is saying tin is a relatively rare element in the Earth's crust with approximately 2 parts per million compared with iron at 50,000 parts per million. The tin mineral cassiterite is mainly found in Southeastern Asia countries such as Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Bolivia, and Nigeria. Bolivia, yes, which is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There is a tin source in Bolivia. Bolivia's Huanuni mine was discovered by accident and was the world's largest underground mine for tin from the late 1940s through the end of the 20th century. So it was discovered.
Wait. The tin mine itself was discovered and they kept mining it? Or
Right. Was it an ancient
the tin
mine?
was discovered?
Was the tin discovered by accident or was an ancient mine discovered by accident? That's the question. But yeah, people have talked about how that's the only source of tin in the Americas, basically. And based on that list, that's right, Bolivia.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's interesting, and I should probably find this article, maybe I'll do it for the next segment, is there was a recent article that came out that was saying that they found a tomb full of elongated skull people in Bolivia. So
Long heads.
yeah, long heads in Bolivia.
Your ancestors were in Bolivia, Watcher. Freaking calculating.
So they care about no one.
Yeah, that's right.
They're highly calculating and care about no one. Bolivia is also the place where the Samaipata Megalith is that we discussed a couple of shows back. That completely unexplained, massive. It's not really a megalith. It's, what would you call that? It's a rock cut feature.
Yeah.
The entire top of that ridge or mountaintop is just a massive bare rock, and somebody came through there and cut it to where like a giant alien spaceship can clamp onto it or something like that. And that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
It has zero use as any kind of housing. You know, there are little cubbies into it or whatever, but then you can't get shelter from them. And it's in a place where you don't want to live. It's 11,000 feet above sea level anyway.
Yeah. I don't know anything about smelting, but somehow it's like you could maybe do something there with, or, you know, depending on how they mined, like we had talked about this before, like the idea that these step pyramids were sort of like sluices.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they're washing ores. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yep.
And you would, you know, basically on the edges, it would leave all of the heavier metals.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right. And like then there's all the Chulpa towers. Right, the Silistani that they call them. Supposed burial towers. Tomb towers.
Yeah.
tower tombs that have no entrances that you have to dump the bodies in from the top.
Yeah.
Rather unceremoniously. So.
Right. And the
Terra Preta, there it is. The Amazonian soil.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that stuff is actually alive and it rebuilds itself. That was what was fascinating about it. Like they determined that it had to have I don't remember the details, but it cannot be. They were saying that this is not a natural thing. The soil itself, all of it together, is a single, not a single, but it's a collective organism. And like in regular farming, if you like farm a field and you plant peanuts, or let's say you plant cotton, and then next year you plow it up and you plant cotton again, and the next year you plant, it'll deplete
certain
elements, and then the cotton won't grow very well anymore. So we have to do like, what is it called with it? Rotation crops.
Yeah.
So you have to rotate peanuts because peanuts will like use other, they will use other nutrients from the soil and replenish the nutrients But if you don't do that, that soil will sit there and be unsuitable for cotton for a long time.
Right. Until something moves, some
other grasses or whatever
moves in that replenishes it.
Right. So Terra Preta actually, if you give it a year or two, will just completely replenish itself. Just totally rebuild the nutrient matrix in it.
Okay, so I want to what.
The Watcher says the Terra Preta is very high in fungi and bacteria. The biological components of the soil are balanced, so their wastes basically recharge the soil.
Yeah.
And there was like multiple meters of this beneath the Amazon jungle, underneath it, which means that somebody built it before the jungle was there. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to kind of change the subject a little bit, going on this idea of this rotating crops and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the idea that I've talked about, I think, on the podcast before, about ways to get energy. And there seems to be...
Oh, you're talking about...
this way you can... like
talking about free lunches?
Yeah, free lunches. Like you can do one thing and... like say you're trying to generate energy or whatever, like just think of a hydroelectric dam. So the water is flowing and it's turning a turbine, and that's, producing your electrical energy, and you can send that or whatever. But the water is having to fall in order to do that. So it's the potential energy in the water,
right? Because
the water's coming from up high and going seeking a low energy state down low.
The free lunch is that water is falling from somewhere up high, and what picked it up there was not us. Like, it was the sun.
Exactly. We don't have to pick it up.
We don't have to pick it up there.
So it goes down into the ocean, and then the sun heats the ocean, and you get the water vapor, and the water vapor rises up, and then the winds
rains
blow
on the highlands.
The winds blow the water vapor, and then it rains up on the highlands, and then it converges into the streams and rivers and so on and so forth. So there's this set of transductions or something of energy and of substances into different states, or whatever, combined with other forces. So it's just this basic idea that I'm thinking of in terms of creating energy or getting the quote unquote free lunch, where you take these natural forces, and if you put them together in the right order, the cycle will continue, and you can sort of put your transducer into one
out of
aspect of that cycle, right? And take some excess energy out. Well, it's not excess, but you can take some of the energy out of the system
without destroying the system,
without completely destroying it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of the plants doing this, right? It's the same thing. Like they're using this energy, and obviously we've got this massive fire up in the sky, right? That we're not really going in the cycle with that thing. That's the free lunch. The main free lunch is the sun.
Yeah.
So the sun is the free lunch and what we have to do down here is sort of arrange all of these various things in order so that this free lunch energy that's coming in will continue this cycle.
Yeah.
So the plants are doing the same thing. Like you've got all these plants, and they whatever the soil's made up of is typically the remnants of the other plants and other things that were there, and they were surviving due to the energy coming from the sun. and they'll replenish it so much, and then you can grow something there for a while until it starts to deplete, and then something else moves in and takes over, and then it'll deplete other things, but then replenish the things that the other thing depleted.
Yeah.
And you might go through these cycles of, you know, in the natural state of things, you can, without man like coming in and doing agriculture or whatever, you know, a quote unquote rainforest will go through this extremely long cycle, like long in terms of time, of the various plants taking over, different trees, different grasses, different molds, different fungi, different whatever, all of that life taking over and then depleting and dying out, and then something else taking over.
Yeah. And giant snakes.
Yeah.
Which we all know live in jungles.
I think that's really cool. And I'm leading up to this thought I had when you were reading from Graham Hancock. And this is way off the topic of the agricultural
That's
stuff.
all right. That's all right, man. This is the Tangent Cube.
Yeah, it was this idea of eternal life. And it just dawned on me that, like, so you have the Native Americans who, from what I've learned, have this idea of the wolf spirit or the buffalo spirit or the, you know, it's a single entity.
Right. An oversoul for this entire animal species. Yeah.
So I was plugging that into the idea of eternal life and thinking about how the ancients talked about eternal life. Like, okay, so the gods had eternal life, right? Now, let's say we strip all of the meaning that we have in modern times from the word God. Like, we don't know what that word means, and we're just plugging it in, and it's this placeholder for a word that the ancients were talking about. We don't know what it is.
Right.
But the God of humans, who has eternal life, and you go with the Native American culture, the God of horses or the God of the wolf, and they all have eternal life. And that eternal life is the entire species.
Yeah.
And it's continuation, right? So you'll have species that go extinct, and those gods die.
Right.
But the eternal life is the God of humans in this analogy is the actual, like, the quote unquote spirit or God of the human itself, the fact that we are continuing. And so each one of us seeking eternal life is not like for ourselves, like for our bodies, but for humanity.
Yeah.
Eternal life for
the species,
the God of humanity, or whatever, the actual spirit of humans.
Right.
I just thought that was cool. Like,
that is cool.
Like, so
except that you keep destroying my dreams of finding the fountain of youth. Individual eternal life.
But then you back away from it and you look at this, like, the ultimate God, right? Is all of life.
Yeah.
And that continuation and the speciation or the different species dying out or coming into existence.
Yeah.
Is from that standpoint no longer relevant. It's the whole thing continuing.
Right. Life itself.
Yeah. So that's like the quote unquote creative God or the creator God.
Life finds a way.
That's right. It is immortal.
Yeah, I think we've said before on the podcast when we're talking about extinctions and so on and so forth, and the idea of extinction events and everything. We've said that species, like individual animal or plant lives, are incredibly fragile.
Yeah,
lives of a species can be, some are very robust, like rats, humans. You know, some species are incredibly robust and are adapters. Some are incredibly fragile, like, you know, like ones that have specific environments that they cannot live without. They're what are they called? Niche. They inhabit niche pockets in the environment or whatever, like the purple spotted gnat or whatever.
Yeah. I was gonna do something like that.
The golden cheek warbler,
the fluttered hook-tailed gilled lizard.
Yeah. But life is robust.
Yeah.
Like, there's evidence now that there's good evidence now that there was at least single-celled life forms on the planet Earth so soon after its supposed congealing out of the
primordial
soup of the solar system that it's not very, this is why we get to panspermia.
Yeah.
Right? It's happened so quickly after the formation of the planet, and according to the standard model of formation of planets, the planet should have been like, an incredibly destructive, very quickly changing, constant global catastrophe, whatever, methane belching, molten rock, volcanoes everywhere, and totally inhospitable to life for a very long time after it formed. Right, until it sort of cooled and calmed down. Well, that's not the case. Like there's evidence of life so far back.
Yeah.
And then it has survived everything the planet has gone through since then in some form or another. Entire genres of species of animal types have been wiped out over and over again, but life is still here.
Finds a way.
And it has found a way every time.
Yeah, so the Watcher's saying in this analogy that the 10 commandments of religion are the key to eternal life, or which are the key to eternal life, are rules by which to ensure
the survival of the species.
The reason why Russ has to finish all of the sentences I'm reading from the Watcher is because the corner of my computer is in front of that monitor. Just so you know.
He can't see the last couple of words.
I have to move away from my mic to see it. But yeah, so like the Viracocha who came...
So let's try that again. Read it until you can't see it, and I'll pick up from there.
So the 10 commandments of religion, which are the key to eternal life, are rules by which to ensure...
the survival of our species.
Like the Viracocha who came and told people how to live and be functional. Laws and agricultural and
whatnot.
Yes. So yeah, that's really what the context I was thinking of it in. Like this quest for eternal life. That's just been a big mystery to me, like that was one of the reasons why the Epic of Gilgamesh was cool. And I had a teacher from high school, my English 4 teacher, before he passed away. We went and visited him, and we were just talking about some of these subjects that we used to talk about in that class. And, I brought up Gilgamesh, and he was the one that explain the point of the eternal life, the seeking of eternal life, or how it turned out for Gilgamesh, and that he found out that it was in his deeds, and it was in the city that he built and all this stuff, and that just blew my mind.
Yeah,
and that's and in this analogy, that's what it was. Like you build this civilization to continue the species, to ensure the continuation of the species, right?
Right.
Because you're in a very fragile state if you're in this nomadic, tribal, hunter-gatherer state, because the environment changes. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You have to develop the AAA in order to be able to actually
learn to adapt the environment to
the environment to yourself. That's right. So we have to do that with space.
Yes.
Like ultimately for the human race, for life itself, whatever, we can take many more impacts and it could wipe everything out. And somehow it's been proven that it just continues. And it makes a lot more. But for ourselves, we have to figure out a way to overcome that.
Yeah.
And I just think that's badass. So this is what these people were doing, the study of agriculture, all this stuff, all of the messages they left behind.
Yeah.
Like, as you can imagine a civilization going through a cataclysm, all of these legends and stories that we're getting from down, being passed down to us from these ancient peoples seeking eternal life, that if they had witnessed one of these catastrophic events, their entire culture from that point would be obsessed with the idea of eternal life for humans, for their progeny,
eternal life, or for people as a whole.
Right. For yes, that's what I mean.
Like we almost all died. Yeah. Yeah. So basically the idea is you got to get out in space because
you're going to be okay, kid. You're going to be okay.
We're going to take a break and come back with the final segment.
pursuit of pyramids, we continue. Episode 75, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, final segment
Of the final hour.
We just figured out what it all means.
We did?
Yeah. Yep. For this episode, we know what it all means now. But we won't know again at the beginning of the next episode.
Right. Next episode will be totally clueless.
Right. We know now that eternal life is just
Trying not to die
as much as possible. It's a hashtag. It's a catchphrase.
That's right.
For trying not to die for the entire species.
So that may be like what they meant by let us make a name for ourselves so that we shall not be scattered across the face of the earth. Like making a name may have some ancient connotation of this is permanence.
Yeah. What was it that there was something about that translation? I don't know if it was ancient Hebrew.
Oh, the Shem?
That was, the Shem, which was to raise a stone.
Yeah.
Something like that. So the raising of the stone is symbolic for the structure of civilization.
Yeah. Could be that, yeah.
Maybe. Anyway. Don't mean to get too.
I remember the people of renown or the men of renown, like because the old one of the translations was the sons of God and the daughters of men were the men of renown or the people of renown, and the word renown.
How do you spell that word?
REKNOWN.
Okay.
Right. People of high name. People whose names were known.
Yeah.
Basically what that means. But
it's also interesting that know, KNOW, was synonymous with procreating.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, to know something.
To know.
Yeah.
So men of renown.
Yeah.
It's weird that root.
That is weird. That is weird.
There.
But what I'm getting at is the whole renown thing was the people of renown, the people whose names were known, but it's also the high people, the people of high names, right?
Yeah.
This is where giants comes in. They were high people. But Sitchin was saying that if you looked at it, actually, it was the people of the sky.
No K in renown.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's no K. Yeah, the condition of being known or talked about by many people, semicolon, fame. Yeah, renown.
Damn it. My connection is lost.
No, it's not, because the K is just taken out. It's still there. Known.
That's true.
Yeah.
We can just say that.
Yeah.
Because we're Snake Bros. No degrees.
The K was taken out and put in snake. Right?
Yeah.
Come on, guy.
Before that, it was the Snaeful.
The Snay people.
Yeah. Very nice. They were very nice people. They were wonderful.
Nice people. The good folk. The Snayful.
The Snaeful.
That's where the K from renown went. Okay. So there's one other piece here, and we've talked about this before too, but this is the details that I wanted to get into this, on the artificial language, right? Another possible legacy of Tiahuanaco, and again, this is from Magicians of the Gods by Graham Hancock. Another possible legacy of Tiahuanaco and of the Viracochas lay embedded in the language spoken by the local Aymara Indians, a language regarded by some specialists as the oldest in the world. In the 1980s, Ivan Guzman de Rojas, a Bolivian computer scientist, accidentally demonstrated that Aymara might not only be very ancient, but significantly that it might be a, quote, made up, unquote, language, something deliberately and skillfully designed. Of particular note was this seemingly artificial character of its syntax, which was rigidly structured and unambiguous to an extent thought inconceivable in normal organic speech. This synthetic and highly organized structure meant that Aymara could easily be transformed into a computer algorithm to be used to translate one language into another. Quote, the Aymara algorithm is used as a bridge language. The language of an original document is translated into Aymara and then into any number of other languages, unquote. Was it just coincidence that an apparently artificial language governed by a computer-friendly syntax should be spoken today in the environs of Tiahuanaco? Or could Aymara be a legacy of the high learning that legend attributed to the Viracochas? If so, what other legacies might there be? What other incomplete fragments of an old and forgotten wisdom might be lying scattered around? Fragments which had perhaps contributed to the richness and diversity of many of the cultures that had evolved in this region during the 10,000 years before the conquest. Perhaps it was the possession of fragments like these that had made possible the drawings of the Nazca lines and enabled the predecessors of the Incas to build the impossible stone walls at Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman.
He wanted to say impossible ox.
He did.
But yeah, manufactured language, manufactured soil, manufactured plants. I don't really see a connection there. It's just not really, you can't really draw a connection there.
Yeah. It's just a coincidence, folks.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that though. The Aymara, God, that's so freaking cool. So Google Translate basically uses Aymara.
right. Right.
Or
Like
something
any
like
of the
whatever
massive
algorithm.
any of the massive translation algorithms that are available online use Aymara as a bridge language.
That's just fantastic.
Demonstrated in the 80s, basically. But isn't that what it said?
I don't know.
Let me
Missed that
check.
part.
The computer science that had a very German and then non-German name. Or maybe it's Russian. Ivan Guzman de Rojas. Like, what's happening there? 1980s, yeah. In the 1980s, Ivan Guzman de Rojas, a Bolivian computer scientist, accidentally demonstrated that Aymara might not only be very ancient, but that it might be made up.
That's freaking awesome.
So it makes it easy to build. Like, most organic languages are incredibly complex and have
Right.
all kinds of internal contradictions and,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's very difficult to. The watcher says, how do you accidentally demonstrate that?
The only languages we've made up are
Computer languages.
computer languages, yeah. And I guess math is like a language that we're discovering,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
I don't know.
So I don't know if I should do this in this last segment, but that's another thing I've been looking at are all these different measurement things. That I was like listening to this Randall Carlson thing, and it was like 2-hour deal on his
Man,
what?
so good.
Cosmic cycles and cosmic patterns and cycles of catastrophe. And there's a really fantastic segment in there that I listened to over and over and over, where he's going through all this stuff about metrology and then all these various connections of numbers, and then how they connect in ancient texts and what those ancient texts thus might be trying to show us. And like, okay, first of all, like you talked about this before, but one of the big questions that a lot of people have, I've seen this on Graham Hancock's website in the forums in there, where people are talking about, okay, so there's all these numbers in ancient texts and they're clearly precessional or whatever, but where does the 5,280 come from for a mile? Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like,
that
how
one's
does
good.
that connect? This doesn't make any sense. Where did this seems totally arbitrary, but it's based off the pace,
Yes.
and the pace is roughly 5.28 feet,
Right.
and it's 1,000 paces
Yep.
into a mile, right? So that makes it 5,280. Now that's cool. Like a pace is basically you you make a count every time your right foot hits. So if you start walking and you move your right foot,
Unless you're a southpaw, then you put your left foot.
whichever foot you start with, right? So you basically take 2 steps, and then that's 1 pace. You step with your right and then your left, or you step with your left and your right, that's 1. And then you step twice again, and usually with the average person, the length of their pace is about the height of their body, roughly. So 5.28 is like, that was the Roman, I think it was the Roman pace, right?
5 1/4 feet.
Right. So that's about how tall it was. So, but if you're taller than that, if you're 6'2", your pace is going to be a little longer, but your foot's going to be a little larger than that too. And he was talking about how interesting it is that the foot, the imperial foot is in all these, it's fundamental in all these various measurements all over the place. And it's cool because the foot is our most basic connection to the planet, right?
Yeah.
And then you find all these geodetic measurements that come out in even numbers in feet.
Yeah. Remember when I did that? I can't remember what the numbers are now, but it was about the pace and the furlong
The furlong, yeah.
and the measurement of the world, right?
Right, and how there's a ratio there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the furlong is to something as something else is to something else.
Yeah.
There's something like that. Yeah, what was it? See, I should have written
So it was
stuff
something
down.
about mil, like mile being mil. The root word there is mil, which is 1,000.
Right.
So the mile is 1,000 paces. That was part of it. The furlong is it's like 700 and something.
660, right? Or 600, maybe you're right, 640.
Yeah. I did this in
It's
a previous
1/8 of a
podcast.
mile, right? Isn't it 1/8 of a mile?
I can't remember. No, I thought the furlong is more than a mile, isn't it? I don't know.
No, it's less. But basically, like a furlong in inches,
Oh, yeah. That's what it was.
that's what it is. Like if you take the furlong and you figure out how many inches it is, it comes out to 7,000, something like that. And that's how it connects to the mile or whatever. There's a weird connection there that I can't remember.
Yeah, it was something about and then it connects to the size of the Earth.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right.
And it's the same ratio. If you take the furlong and you reduce it to inches, that number is the same ratio, like of the
Yeah.
with the paces in them in that.
Yeah,
thing
like
is-
the
I can't remember what
it's
it was.
something like something like the number of miles, the circumference of the Earth at the equator. The number of miles that is the same number of inches that there is in a furlong or something
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
right.
Yeah.
7,920 inches.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's God, so
That
awesome.
stuff is like amazing.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, okay, so this blew my mind. He's talking about this in there, and I did not know this. Now, I did know that there are many cubits. Like many ancient sites have their own internal cubit,
Yeah.
right? So this has confused people, and this is part of the reason why a lot of the standard model archaeologists are like, oh, well, the cubit was arbitrary. And you can kind of tell that each builder at each individual site had his own cubit thing, and it was not the same as the cubits in other places. And sometimes the differences are fairly large in terms of like accuracy, right?
Yeah.
You might have like this one's like 1.4 inches larger than this cubit in this other place. But Randall Carlson was like, well, if you look at the meridian circumference of the Earth at the place where the site was built, the cubit is a
Fraction
perfect of that.
which is the same ratio as the other. Yeah.
Yes, it's the
same
cubit is a
fraction.
ratio of like, so if you built it at the equator, the cubit is going to be the longest it will be anywhere. The further north or south you go, the cubit gets smaller because it's the same freaking ratio to the ring you can make around the Earth at that freaking, holy crap, dude.
Yeah.
Like that, I was just...
Yeah.
And the other thing he was talking about, this was fascinating too. Like I also knew about we've talked about this before, like the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, and how it's a model of the Northern Hemisphere at a scale of 43,200 to 1.
Right.
Right. And so of course, that number's arbitrary. But it's not. It's a processional number.
Yeah.
But did you know that it's also the radius of the sun in miles in terms of, if you ignore the zeros, the radius of the sun in miles is 432,000 miles. It's like, oh, holy shit. But so he was saying that, like, if you taken all the measurements that we have of the Great Pyramid, and there's two different ways to get external size measurements of the Great Period, and that depends on what you do with the socle, which is the supporting structure built into the bedrock that holds the outside of the walls, right? So depending on if you start at the bottom of the socle, where it's the corner of it where it's hitting the bedrock, or at the top of the socle. So there's two different ones, and he points out that it was supposed to be both. Like it's intended. If you look at the measurements for both, that tiny little discrepancy is important, and I can't remember exactly how. Like, I'll look it up. I want to go into this in depth on the next show, or maybe the one after the next. But I'm looking at this stuff, and like he's gotten me interested. And again, I got to write all this stuff down. But the point I'm getting at, the larger point I'm getting at, is that he shows how, and he talks about how if you take two sides, or if you wait for 2 seconds of rotation, like during 2 seconds, the Earth rotates the same distance as the entire perimeter of the bottom of the Great Pyramid, right? So he shows you how, given this model, if you take all the measurements and you multiply them by 43,200, you get a circumference of the Earth at the equator that is like in agreement with the latest satellite measurements of the circumference of the Earth at the equator to like it's off about 315 feet.
Right, but I thought that the smaller circumference above the socle was more relative to the pi relationship between the base and the height.
That's right. That's what it is.
So because they have these two numbers, right? You have the Earth, which is squashed because it's spinning and it's got a moon out there.
Yeah.
That you've got this relationship between the lower part of the base. I think this is correct. And again, it's like really hard to find that information other than Randall Carlson videos. But
right. But what I was getting at, and this is what blew my mind in this part, was he was saying, so like it's off by modern satellite measurements by 300 and something feet. But he points out then after he was like, but if we did a modern complete measurement of the Earth at the equator every year for 10 years, because of various massive tidal forces and other gravitational forces, the Earth actually gets kind of kneaded around.
Yeah.
So if the sun and the moon are on the same side, it's like going to be sort of different or whatever. And he's like, every single one we've ever taken has been 500 or 600 feet off from the one we did previously. And it's not because our technology is getting better. It's because the Earth itself shifts and changes.
Yes.
So the numbers you get from the Great Pyramid being only 300 feet off
of the most
modern satellite measurements means that their measurement is just as accurate as our most modern satellite measurements.
Yeah.
Because we can't get any more precise than that.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
That and the whole like the qubits are based on where they are, and like those two things just holy crap. Okay, so the watcher is saying, what was the number of the Roman pace again? What do you mean? What do you mean? One pace is about 5.28 feet, and there was 1,000 of them in a mile. Is that what you're asking? Got it? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the relationship between the furlong, which is only used now in horse races. I think that's the only...
Yeah.
No one, unless you're like a crazy horse racer or like gambler guy, no one knows what a furlong is. Like, what the hell is a furlong? So yeah, he says a furlong is an eighth of a mile or 220 yards, which is 660 feet, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So all of that metrology stuff, I love that stuff, but I can never remember all the numbers.
But if you're 6 feet tall, it's 666 feet.
Yeah. So how, like, again, you would get, like, with the whole sun, the radius of the sun being 432,000 miles, you know, so that matches up with part of the way we get I'm sorry. No, that's not right. Like, but that makes an interesting correlation with, so the moon in miles, its radius is 1080. Its diameter is 2160, the same number of years in a precessional age.
That's so weird.
How is this happening? Starting out with the king's foot.
Yeah.
All these numbers are matching, and like, so we get what appears to be at first glance arbitrary lengths that we've just decided to make standards, and then it turns out that all these celestial bodies have these numbers built into them because of these quote unquote random, like arbitrary links. But then those numbers that come out from these arbitrary links then become precessional.
Yeah.
How is this working? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's an awesome rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to memorize it all.
Yeah.
And that guy just stand up there for
just rolls it off. Yeah. He's like, whoa. Then he goes into Gematria. So I have always been sort of fascinated with the Kabbalistic practice of Gematria, right? I was not I don't think I was aware that so he basically says, so before the Indo-Arabic number system, the Hindu-Arabic number system characters, which we use now for numerals, right?
Yeah.
Before that, there wasn't a separate system of number. Like, people used basically letters, like the Romans, M, C, C, V, I, right? Those are letters.
Yeah.
But in older scripts, like ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, other Semitic scripts or whatever, numbers and letters were synonymous. They were the same thing. So you could write things out alphabetically into words, but all of those characters also represented numbers. Mm-hmm. And he starts pointing out one after the other of these ancient phrases or words or symbols or even entire passages from ancient texts, and how when you add them up based on their number bases, you get processional numbers again and again and again and again. How did that happen?
That's so freaking good.
I don't understand that at all. Like that relationship, I have not been able to figure out how those, you can sort of see, like, so if you're coming up with metrology, you're coming up with various ancient measuring systems, like they must have been geniuses, but the sizes of things are out there, and you can sort of start to get sizes and dividing and whatever, and then you get down to the closest approximation of human lengths that you can, right? You could see that maybe working that way, even though it doesn't seem to have been that way. They worked upwards instead of downwards. Like they didn't take the radius of the sun and then work their way down to the human foot, right? It was the other way around somehow. Yeah. And somehow you still have processional numbers. But how did words of an organically generated language and a supposedly organically generated alphabetic system that they then that they also associated with numbers very simply, where A, B, C, D is 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then you start writing passages, and all of those passages equal processional numbers.
Yeah, that's
just. In other words, is this pattern of vibration? Again, I think this is. I go back to, like, we live in a universe of data, or like you would say, there are just enormous vibrational patterns, and it cannot help but be in those patterns. Anything that we do, talking, writing, the math.
Yeah, it's like those, I still don't remember where you got this, but you were reading something about the 3 levels of language.
Yeah.
That there are those who can speak all 3 or understand all 3, but most people just understand the surface level. Yeah. But there's all this other stuff going on, no matter what. Even if you're a normal person who doesn't understand it, when you're speaking, you're also communicating these other 2 sub-levels that have meaning in a totally different way.
Yeah. And again, like, another mystery on the whole, how do these numbers match up to everything, is, like I said, the radius in miles of the moon is 1080. And we know that, like, zeros are placeholders, so you can add them or remove them as necessary. And the moon is associated with silver, and its atomic weight, which no ancient person could possibly have known according to the Standard Model, is 108. Like,
yeah.
And it has been associated with silver for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. Like, well, it's because it's so colored silver. Well, why did it just happen to be 108?
Yeah.
We didn't arbitrarily give silver that atomic number. That's its atomic weight. It's based on the atom structure.
Yeah. And the 1080 comes from the imperial measurement system, like
right.
So that's what I love. The bottom line that he's always pointing out is that man, and this is an ancient saying or something that was written, is that man is the measuring stick of the universe.
Of the universe, right. And he also talks about how if you look at the entire macro world, all the enormous things that we see out in the universe, and then all the tiny stuff, that we're right in the middle in terms of size. Yeah. There are things that are incredibly enormous, and there are things that are incredibly small, and the ratios of those are the same relative to us. We're right in the middle of size in the universe.
Yeah.
So man is the measure, right? And he talks about, like, so you have the octagon. Is it the octagon or the pentagon?
So that's where you go back to, like, this antiquated idea that we're the center of the universe. But when you look at it in that respect, it's like, well,
we are the center of the universe in terms of size.
It's not about where we are in space.
Wait. I am the center of the universe in terms of size. I, like, actually am right in the middle. You're a little bit.
I'm a southpaw. Yeah. You're right.
I know. I'm right.
Yeah. I knew you knew that.
But yeah, all this stuff just, like, it's hard to talk about because you have to remember all the numbers, but it continuously blows my mind. And, like, listening to Randall Carlson on this stuff, like, you guys should go, anybody listening to this, go check out the Sacred Geometry International YouTube channel. They've got this 2-hour video posted of his cosmic patterns and cycles of catastrophe. So Should definitely check it out. Thanks for that, pun watcher.
He just posted a picture of Commander Data talking to Commander Data.
And said it's a universe of data. Terrible puns here at Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Corporate Studies.
Yep.
I think we're about done. I think that's about it. What do you think?
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys, again, can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com.
And you can go to the website at brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com.
That's right. And you can comment there. Talk to us. Talk about the shows, whatever you want.
Check out the Encyclopedia
And the glossary.
so you can be up to speed on all of the crazy names that we give all this weird stuff that we're talking about.
Tiahuanaco and Puma Punku and Sacsayhuaman.
And again, the Twitter feed. Follow us, Snickers.
At Snickers. And
Snake
share the
Bros
shows
and
with people. Share the shows with people. You can do it on Facebook by sharing the link to one of the shows on the website. That's the easiest way to do it. Or you can share it through Twitter by retweeting when we post the Twitter feed, post the show link on the Twitter feed.
Yeah, and please, if you like the show, donate. There's a donate button on the website. You can click there and contribute to our pyramid scheme so we can go get lost and die in pyramids.
That's right.
And buy some new equipment for the Tangent Cube to continue making better and better audio quality.
That's right. And you guys can also give us reviews anywhere you can. iTunes is the best place. And thank you very much for all the positive reviews we've gotten there already. It is awesome. We have a 5-star rating there, and that's great. So keep it up, guys. You guys are awesome.
And we're all about climate control in the Tangent Cube. So we got to get a new air conditioner. We got to control the climate in here. During the summer, it's cube warming. And in the winter, it's cubicle cooling.
Cubicle cooling. That's right.
We definitely need man-made climate change inside the Tangent Cube. But anyway, we very much appreciate all of you for listening and your comments and your emails.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And
remember, Flat Earthers, the only thing you have to fear is sphere itself.